Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Eugene Driscoll from the Valley Independent Sentinel. Welcome to a webinar on the Seymour Board of Education's proposed budget. With me in the Valley Indy offices are Kristen Harmeling, Yasho Patordi, and Rick Belden, all Seymour school officials. And the Valley Indy's mission tonight is just to be a conduit between the school board and the public. So they're going to go through a presentation that you can follow along on your screen, and at the end there'll be questions. If you have questions in advance, you can post it in the chat room below, and we'll make sure they get posed at the end of this presentation. And with that, I will pass it over to Kristen, and we will begin our presentation. I'm just going to move this microphone slightly so it doesn't pick up your paper.
Perfect.
And we're set.
Eugene, thank you so much for hosting this event, and thank everyone for joining us from hopefully the comforts of your home, particularly on a cold and windy night at the end of March. Go figure. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and I'm going to jump right in. I'll introduce myself quickly first. I am Kristen Harmeling. I've been on the Board of Education. I'm in my third year. Prior to that, I spent 2 years on the Seymour Town Board of Finance. I have 2 children who are in college, and I have 3 children who are at Bungie School. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to jump right in. And what I'd like to do tonight is start out by talking just a little bit about the breadth of the services that the Seymour School District provides. We employ about 300 full and part-time employees, about half of which live in the town of Seymour. We service about 2,300 students. Across all of our schools, primarily the middle and the high school, we service 20 clubs, 20+ sports teams. Our graduation rate is 87.5, and there's lots of different ways to calculate graduation rates. This number that I'm sharing with you this evening is a 4-year cohort graduation rate, which is calculating the percent of students that graduate in 4 years' time. If we were to add in the percent of students that maybe take an extra summer or an extra semester, we add an additional 6.3% to that figure, and that is right on par with the state average, if not a little bit above. And in 2012, 88.7% of Seymour graduates pursued higher education. And in this current school year, we have 186 high school students enrolled across 10 AP courses. And when it comes to student participation with our school, again, all services that the school provides, we have 307 middle schoolers who are participating in clubs or other extracurricular activities, and 147 in sports. At the high school level, the numbers flip a little bit. We have more sports teams that are offered, so we've got more students participating in sports and slightly fewer, 119, engaged in non-sports extracurricular activities. So as you can see, we are absolutely a service organization. We don't make widgets, we don't make cars, well, actually we do make cars. Thanks to a grant that one of our assistant principals at the high school brought in this year, we did make an electric car that won an award. But we're a service organization, and as such, when we get into the numbers behind our budget, you will see that the vast majority of our budget is dedicated towards paying the people that provide services to our students and families in Seymour. On slide 3, you will notice our budget history for the past several years. So a few things I want to point out on this slide. The first of which is, if you have seen one of our budget presentations before, or if you have been looking at any of the publicly available budget documents from starting in January of this year, you'll notice that the requested amount that we're talking about for the schools this year is a 2.9% increase, about $31.8 million. That is lower than the numbers that you would have seen on information that was published starting in January. Last week, the Board of Finance moved forward the budget that they will have discussed at the town hearing next Thursday, and the Board of Education budget was reduced by $186,000 last week. So what you'll see moving through here reflects that adjustment. And what you'll see posted on the Seymour Schools website also reflects that adjustment. So the Board of Education met on Monday. We talked about what we need to do to make that number work. We were disappointed to give up some of the new initiatives that we were looking forward to, but we're here. sharing with you what we hope to accomplish and what we hope to do should we receive a 2.9% increase. Before I leave this slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the trend history. You can see that going back to 2008 and 2009, if we look at that time period through this current school year, our budget is up only 6% over that 5-year period, or on average 1.2% per year. During that same period of time, the percent increase that we needed to cover our contractual obligations was over 3.4% each year. So as you can see, even though the dollar amount is going up slightly each year, sometimes it quite honestly feels like we're falling further behind with each year, because we rarely are able to gain from the taxpayers what we need to keep level services moving forward. I also want to call your attention, because I will make note of it when it comes to some of the things we're trying to do this year, is that 0% increase. So in 2009 and 10, we were asked by the town government officials to come in with a 0% increase. So that was the absolute lowest point of what is known as the Great Recession throughout our country. And the school board recognized, it just was not practical to expect taxpayers to have a significant increase in their taxes. So the school board asked for a 0% increase. Well, we got a 0% increase. However, the year after that, we were certainly not thinking we would get a 0% increase, but we did. When a school system has to accommodate 2 years of a 0% increase at the same time as contractual obligations are going up, as heat is going up, as energy costs are going up, services do get cut. And we are still playing catch up from those 2 years of 0% increase. So before we get into the numbers, I wanted to share with all of you how we develop the budget. So once contractual obligations and known cost adjustments are calculated, budget allocations and requests are driven by some very short and long-term goals that are developed under the direction of Superintendent Syriac with school and administrative input before those ideas and that budget is ever presented to the Board of Education. Once Superintendent Syriac brings her recommended budget to the Board of Education and we adopt it, it becomes ours. And it's our obligation as a Board of Education to socialize this information, which is exactly why we're so thrilled that Eugene is hosting us this evening, and to make sure that people understand why we're asking for what we're asking for from the town. So for this year, Superintendent Syriac shared with us several key objectives, and she shared them with us in the form of addressing the different levels of schooling in our district. So at the high school, we wanted to make sure that our budget was helping us prepare for secondary school reform legislative mandates. We wanted to continue to strengthen the fine arts program. We wanted to continue to build on after-school programs to increase student engagement. At the middle school, we continue to try to balance and reduce class sizes. The middle school was hit the hardest when we had 2 years of 0%. And because of the nuances and difficulties of scheduling at the middle school, where you've got some children who are taking band and some who are taking chorus, and we're trying to accommodate and make sure that the children are getting everything they need, plus the things that they want, we can't just take the number 100, for example, and divide it by 4 and say, hey, let's put 20 or 25 children in every class. So there are classes at our middle school right now where there are 30 or more children in those classes. And as a district, one of the things that I've come to learn that we value collectively as a community of educators, but also as a community of citizens and residents, is small class sizes. So we've done an amazing job at keeping class sizes small in our elementary schools, and we've got to sort of get a handle on our class size issues at the middle school, and we're trying to do that this year, and I'll tell you how in a few minutes. We also want to be able to explore the inclusion of some STEM programs at the middle school. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That is a 21st century skill that nationwide, as well as in the state of Connecticut, has been recognized as opening up opportunities for students in careers and in information that's just simply relevant and interesting to kids, particularly at the middle school level. And at the elementary level, we are looking to increase available instructional support. Another value that we hold very dear and very seriously in Seymour is the emphasis on early support and intervention. So even amidst challenging budget seasons, we were able to move from a half-day kindergarten program to a full-day kindergarten program. So what we would like to be able to do now is to make sure that our kindergarten teachers have all the support they need and that our students have all the support that they need so that when they leave kindergarten, they are readers. They're ready to come into first grade as readers. So we want to put some paraprofessionals in the classroom, instructional paras, to help teachers and help students to make sure, quite honestly, that the dollars we're spending in kindergarten are dollars well spent and that our students don't need intervention, particularly in reading, a few years down the road. Now, these specific goals are well aligned with our overarching goals of our strategic plan. And I'm going to speed up the pace of this, the presentation a little bit because I know we want to get to the numbers, but I did think it was important to sort of give you this preamble as to why the numbers are what they are. So in our school strategic plan, we have three elements of that plan: curriculum, technology, and communication. What we mean by curriculum is that we are seeking, it's an imperative, quite frankly, to develop and implement a well-articulated pre-K through 12 curriculum that identifies knowledge and skills along with appropriate instruction and assessment strategies. Steps the district has taken to accomplish this goal is to add some additional high school courses that are focused on STEM, as well as the arts, as well as personal finance and alternative energy. We have worked very hard over the past 3 years to create a new ELA and math curriculum, ELA standing for English Language Arts. Our other curriculum are on 5-year cycles to refresh and renew, and these are always collaborative efforts between our teachers, our administrators, and sometimes we bring on consultants and content area experts to help us develop curriculum and choose instructional materials. We're always doing continual professional development with our teachers. As I mentioned, we instituted the full-day kindergarten, and we do SRBI, which is scientifically researched behavioral intervention, to make sure that we're working with kids the moment that we know they're struggling instead of letting troubles and challenges accumulate over time. The second goal of our strategic plan revolves around technology. And here what we're looking to do is to redefine and recreate the learning environment in ways that incorporate our emerging understanding of how students learn and how technology is changing the way they engage with the world. I had the privilege of spending time with some middle school students and 8th graders, and when you talk to them about school, they really feel like they're checking their technology at the door, that they're spending more time using and exploring technology for good. You know, we're not talking about coming to school and using Facebook and things like that, but they feel like when they get to school, they're actually dialing back their engagement with a world of information that's available to them. And we don't want that to be the case. We want technology to be integrated into instruction and to assist and aid in learning. So some of the steps the district has taken, we worked very hard to ensure that our infrastructure was ready. And I'm personally very proud to live in a town that did things the right way. We spent time and we spent our money directed towards making sure the infrastructure was ready. I was at a focus group with some teachers, and a teacher from Bridgeport said, you know, we got this grant and now we all have Google Chromebooks, but we don't have Wi-Fi access. And that is just a shame on so many levels. It's just horrible for the teachers, for the students to know they have a technology they can't use. It's also an absolute waste of taxpayer dollars. So we wanted to make sure we did things right, get the infrastructure there, and now we're at a place where we are able to add additional devices to our school. You'll notice I've got a little starburst on this slide that says grants, because one of the grants that we did apply for out of central office and received this year was $248,000 for technology devices. So we are moving pretty close and pretty rapidly to a one-to-one environment where every child will have access to a device at the same time, which opens up a whole world of instructional opportunities for a teacher, as opposed to having to take a class to a lab, so where they've all got a computer, or as opposed to having just a center-based computerized workstation in a classroom. So we work very hard to look for grants to make these things become a reality. The third aspect of our strategic plan is communications. So steps that we've taken is tonight's webinar. First and foremost, we don't put very much money against this goal. We rely on creativity, and quite frankly, we rely on you all to listen, to come to meetings, to participate exactly like you are tonight, and also to spread the word. Other things that we've done are budget presentations to the PTA. Superintendent Syriac, in her first year being our superintendent, started the Citizens Academy that runs for 4 evenings, twice a year in the fall and in the spring, and it's a wonderful opportunity to really understand how the school system works, and where the money goes and what it takes to run a school system. So that's a little bit about our strategic plan. I mentioned that we are always looking for grants, and grants can come from any place. We have teachers who apply for grants, central office staff that applies for grants. Our security director has applied and won very many grants, as well as some of our school administrators, particularly at the high school level. So in addition to looking for grants, we also look for cost-saving initiatives. And I'm so glad that Mr. Belden could be here tonight, because before I was even on any elected town board, I knew that in Mr. Belden we had someone who really liked saving money. So some of the things that we've done as a district, and they have largely been led by Mr. Belden, is joined an electricity consortium in 2007, and we extended that relationship in 2010. And you can see here on slide 12 what some of those cost-saving numbers have been. So we don't have an opportunity to save lots of money every year, but when we can, we sure do try to jump on it. Another example is the move that we made to in our health insurance for some of our larger unions, primarily the teachers. And we were able to realize about $300,000 in cost savings in 1 year alone, because teachers opted to move to a plan that was less expensive from the district's point of view and offered different kind of flexibility and different kinds of options for the teachers. And that really helped us get through last year's budget hump, because we realized those savings last year. And in 2012, we eliminated a central office position, which resulted in annual savings of $120,000. We eliminated the position of curriculum director. So at the same time, we do all that we can to try to save the town money and still keep services high and of the very highest quality for our students. We can be stymied by state mandates. So a state mandate is simply something that the legislature in Hartford passes that sometimes they don't think is going to cost a lot of money, but when it comes to the practical application of a law in our school system, it actually does end up costing us money. And I want to make sure that you know, many state mandates are the right thing to do for students, and I absolutely believe that our elected officials do things from a place that they believe is doing the right thing. But they do often come at a cost, and they can come with reporting and implementation rules, including timelines that take away our local flexibility to be creative and as cost efficient as possible. So on the next slide, I'm going to share with you some examples of unfunded mandates. At the top of the list is SEED. That's the new teacher evaluation and teacher development system. SEED was an unfunded mandate. There is a significant increase in the number of observations that people have to do and the number of paperwork. So some districts have actually tried to bring on new staff. There was a district who actually asked for an additional 4 administrators so they could accomplish the goals of SEED. Well, Seymour didn't take that route. So while I can't provide you with a dollar figure for what SEED has cost Seymour, certainly we have directed professional development training towards helping our teachers understand how SEED will impact them. But there's opportunity costs there. Anytime we're increasing paperwork and reporting of that nature, something's got to go. There's only so many hours in a day. Another unfunded mandate was Common Core State Curriculum Development. I'm speaking from myself personally. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board at this point. I absolutely support the Common Core State standards, but we did not have the flexibility to implement the standards or to decide things at our own pace. You know, we might have been at a point in time where it was time to redo our math curriculum, but maybe with the LA we weren't quite there. But because of this mandate, our flexibility was taken away, and it did cost money. Again, professional development, all of our resources for 2 years just about was directed towards helping our teachers get prepared for Common Core. Other examples are a lifeguard. A new state law was passed that for all swim practices and swim meets, we have to have a coach plus a lifeguard on duty, and that cannot be the same person. So you'll see that in our budget to add a stipend for a teacher to serve that role. When it comes to green initiatives, some of you on the phone might have recalled one of our schools tried to get parents to help out at the end of the year and donate cleaning supplies for the schools. Well, we weren't allowed to do that because the cleaning supplies that we buy need to be green, which came with an incremental cost. Magnet school tuition outside of our interdistrict agreements. So we have agreements, existing agreements with some of the New Haven magnet schools as well as 2 VOAG schools. So when our students in Seymour want to pursue those kinds of opportunities, there's a limited number of spaces, but we know that we're going to have our students participating in those programs and we can budget accordingly. But the state recently passed a law that said if there's another magnet school that doesn't fill its quota of spots with their own intradistrict schools, they can accept someone from any other town and then they will send a bill to that town. So maybe 2 years ago, or maybe beginning of last school year, all of a sudden we received a bill for a couple of Seymour students who had not been registered in our school because they were young, they were kindergarten or first grade, and it was a bill for a magnet school in Bridgeport. And lo and behold, we had to pay that bill, even though we never entered an agreement to use these magnet schools. Because of a state mandate and a state law, we had to pay these bills. So it's easy to look at our line items and say, well, just cut 5% there and just cut 10% here. But I did want to share with you some of the details behind the inflexibility that we're sometimes faced with when we want to do different kinds of things in a creative way. So here we are with our first slide looking at some of the numbers in the 2014-15 budget request. I've highlighted here for you, circling them or putting them in a beige box, some of the biggest line items. Each one of these slices in the pie chart is reflected in an individual line item in our budget. You'll see many additional sub-line items under things like certified staff and non-certified staff, and that is all available to you. So if you want to dig deeply beyond these top-level line items, I absolutely encourage you to, and to come and ask us questions and explain, what different elements of the budget are. So for purposes of tonight, we're going to stick with these top-level line items, and as you can see, certified staff take up half of our budget. When we add in non-certified staff and employee benefits, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we are a service organization, so our people are 80% of our budget, just a little over $25 million. Other large item expenses are transportation. This obviously includes all of our buses, but also the buses to and from the magnet schools and the VOAG schools that we have agreements with. You'll see $1 million for tuition. A lot of people have asked and said, well, what do you mean tuition? What does that even mean? How come we're paying for tuition? Well, the bulk of those of that line item is for special needs students who need to have go to schools that because Seymour cannot provide the services that they need. So $750,000 of that is for special needs students who are going to schools that are well suited for their particular issues, and the rest of that tuition is for the magnet or the VOAG schools primarily. And then the next large line item you'll see is all supplies, $1.7 million. And that includes instructional supplies, office supplies, copier paper, things of that nature, as well as utilities and gas and the like. So most changes in the line items, because the next slide that I'm going to show you is going to make a comparison between our current year budget as well as the budget that we are hoping will pass this spring. So before we look at those comparisons, I wanted to just give you some highlights. So most changes in line items are primarily due to trimming where we can. You'll notice that professional services has been taken down 5.2%. We make changes usually up, but boy, if they went down, that'd be great too, in things like energy costs and the like. We try to anticipate the needs of our special education students to plan accordingly for tuition and transportation. And also, as I mentioned, we make adjustments for our contractual obligations. I did want to point out that we do deal with multiple unions in our school district. So budget season isn't the time when we negotiate salary, when we negotiate benefit contributions. All of that happens before budget season on the cycle for renegotiation of their contracts. And the district has worked very hard for each time a contract is up for renegotiation. We do try to introduce cost-saving measures. So taking a look at our first eye test chart, I hope you guys have big monitors at home because this cannot be viewed well on a smartphone for certain, is taking a look at the first column. These are our current year budget numbers. Right after that is our 14-15 budget numbers. And then we've also shared with you the difference between the two, both as a dollar amount as well as a percentage amount. You can see we've got several line items here that have not increased. Communications, travel, adult education services, and technology equipment. We've held all of those steady. We've taken some of the smaller line items down. Those are our discretionary accounts where we can kind of squeeze out a little bit more if we need to, although I'll be honest, it's quite difficult. And then you see our certified staff, non-certified staff, employee benefits, etc. I want to share with you some changes because many people will take a look. I'm going to go back 1 minute. Many people will take a look at that certified staff line and they'll make an assumption that everyone's getting a 3.2% raise. That is not, that percentage amount is not a dollar amount in terms of a raise. It's actually just simply what is that salary pool for certified staff. What does that look like this year versus what does that look like next year? And next year, if our budget passes the way it's being presented to you tonight, that certified staff line will include several more teachers. And I'd like to walk you through how we got to a place where we do feel that we can move our district forward, even with a level services quote-unquote budget, even with the cuts that were made and the reductions that were made by the Board of Finance last week. So we were able to realize some savings primarily through the retirement of 4 teachers from the high school, as well as the retirement of a clerical paraprofessional at the high school and the resignation of a clerical paraprofessional at central office. We are not filling either of those positions, and we are redirecting that money to teachers. Of the 4 retiring teachers from the high school, 2 were science teachers. They will be replaced with science teachers. 1 was an English teacher to be replaced with an English teacher, and 1 retiring teacher was a social studies teacher. We're going to replace that position with a fine arts position to grow our fine arts program, and the way the numbers worked and the school administration at the high school felt like that was going to work well. So what typically happens when we have a retiring teacher, that teacher's going to be at a very high step level. They're going to be earning more than a teacher who might be, in their 4th, 5th, or 6th year of teaching. So we're able to realize some savings there. In addition, some of our 2 elementary school principals found ways to reduce their dollar spend in supplies and other accounts. And so we were able to take those savings primarily from staff, but also a little bit with supplies, to redirect that more directly towards student learning. So these freed up money, if you will be able to provide for a middle school language arts teacher specifically to address class size issue, a middle school STEM teacher, again, to address class size issues, but also to give kids the kind of 21st century learning experiences that they really need to be experiencing even as early as middle school, as early as elementary school, to be honest with you. We're also able to take a high school health teacher at the high school from part-time to full-time to accommodate the amount of students who want to take physical education. And as I mentioned earlier, those 4 instructional paraprofessionals, 2 in each elementary school to work with our kindergarten students. And I have at the bottom of this slide one of Superintendent Syriac's phrases. It's all about student learning, and that is primary and the foremost concern on all of our minds when we're putting a budget together, but also when we're engaging in policy conversations and the like. A couple of more changes of note in the certified and non-certified staff line items is the expansion of some of our clubs. So you will see some Appendix E positions. some sports and some non-sports. So Alternative Energy Club, Assistant Drama Club Advisor at the high school, an Assistant Wrestling Coach at the high school. That program has grown exponentially. About 3 or 4 years ago, we were down to 8 wrestlers, and that program was almost cut. But we were able to save that program, and now that program is up to, I believe, about 35 students. And as I mentioned, the Appendix E Assistant Boys Swimming Coach. You'll note that on this slide, incubator funds were used in the current year. What an incubator fund is instead of just deciding, okay, we're going to jump in and start an Audubon club this year, we're going to jump in and start a drama club this year, we like to experiment a little bit to make sure that the students want it and to make sure that it contributes to their education and to their engagement at school. So we're very, very cautious when we introduce new programs to the system, and instead of just adding a line item, because I don't know if any of you deal with budgets, but when things get entered as a line item, they're kind of hard to get rid of. So we want to take a very cautious and conservative approach, and we like to experiment first before we say, yes, this is a program that serves our district and our students well, let's put it in as a permanent thing. And that's what you'll see when we say we're using incubator funds for year 1, and then it converts over. So that wraps up the primary words and thoughts I wanted to share with you on this year's budget. What I'd like to do now is just spend a couple of slides talking about the budget and the referendum history in the town of Seymour. So going back to 2009-2010, in the bar chart, in the column chart, the blue represents the increase that the Board of Education needed to maintain level services. The yellow indicates the amount we asked for. You will notice that in 2010 and 2011, the board was quite aggressive in asking for a $1.6 million increase. That was largely to make up for that 0% year in 2009-2010. Well, that didn't work out so well. We ended up with 0 in 2010 and 2011 as well. So I want to also call your attention to the gray bars in 2012, 13, and 14. So please note that all of those instances and all of those years, the Board of Education received less money than it was asking for. And these requests are coming from our educators. You know, we own the Board of Education budget. I'm quite proud of it on a personal level as well as also on a professional level. But these are things that our educators are telling us they need to move our district forward and do the right thing by our students. I'm going to add to this chart in case people are more comfortable thinking about increases and decreases in terms of percentages. So I've added the percentages to the chart. And I also want to talk a little bit about dollar amounts, what it means when we don't get funded at a level services budget which covers our contractual obligations and changes in things like gas and utilities. So even though we asked for nothing in 2009-2010, we presented the town with a 0% increased budget, we actually had to find savings of $1.2 million because we still had to fulfill our contractual obligations. So there is no question that services were lost in 2009 and 2010. And sometimes the cuts are just too deep and they have to be restored. Well, we didn't have any luck restoring anything in 2010 and 11. So again, we were faced with trying to, quote unquote, find $1.6 million to keep us moving forward. And then you can see so on what we had to trim from the budget and find ways to keep moving forward in the absence of the funds that we felt were needed to advance the district. Now I want to overlay on top of that the number of referendums. And it is only a 5-year trend, so that's not a whole lot of data, but I've been pondering this slide and looking for reaction from people when we present it to them, and I'm just not seeing any patterns here. So it kind of leaves us as a board at a loss in terms of, well, is there a strategy? Is there a magic number in terms of an increase to ask for that would help us achieve our goals on the first referendum? I've lived in Seymour for 15 years, and with each referendum process in each year, it becomes more and more antagonistic. And so by the time you get to a third referendum or a fourth referendum, you kind of really almost feel like you're fighting with your neighbors. So we would love to collaborate with all of you on the phone and find a way that we can move forward together and quite honestly get this done the first time around. And one year that was a particularly difficult year and left us all kind of scratching our heads was in 2010 and 2011. It took 4 referendums to pass the school budget. It was a 0% increase. It was a 0% increase, though, on the 3rd referendum, and even that failed. So that was kind of a hard pill to swallow, if you will. We don't have a lot of opportunities to reduce an education budget from one year to another. Never mind the fact that there's a state law that essentially says we can't do that. It's just not a practical consideration to think that a school budget, or any budget, quite frankly, could actually decrease from one year to next without a significant loss of services. In the case of a school system, it would literally be something like closing a school to realize any significant savings. So we scratch our heads a little bit, and that's why we've tried to do things a bit differently this year, starting with our PTA meetings that occurred last week or the week before last, and with tonight's webinar. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yasu to close us out, and then we'll open it up for questions, and hopefully there's been some questions coming in.
We do have a few questions, yeah.
Great.
Exciting.
Well, the last slide up here is the 901 slide. This is our slogan this year. We looked at the data for the referendums and who voted, and it turns out that every year, every referendum, the first vote out is usually about 900 no votes and somewhere between 600 and 700 yes votes. And as we go through the referendums, the no votes reduce and the yes votes increase until at one point they switch over, sometimes the 3rd referendum, sometimes the 4th referendum, and the budget passes. What we're trying to do this year is trying to get all those votes out that actually passed the budget out the first time. So we're trying to get our number as 901 yes votes out on the first referendum. If we can do that, we could pass the budget and be done with this process in a short period of time and pass the budget that we hope that we can actually use to service the school system this year. Okay, so now Eugene's got some questions.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
good.
it. Well, thank you very much for doing this and for actually pushing the Valley Indy to do this. It's exciting for us, and it's why we're here. I'm scanning. The first question we had, it was, I don't know how to say that, Aggie. I'm just going to say Aggie because that's what I see. She asked about an hour ago, were there any cuts made from the current budget to help save money? Whoever wants to.
I'm going to assume that the cuts from the current budget, we mean cuts from this school year. There's potentially that the caller, for lack of a better term, the chatter, meant the former budget that we presented, just 3 weeks ago. So from last year, we did try to save money on things like professional services. We did not have a big year this year in terms of renegotiating contracts, so we're not able to realize significant savings like health insurance that we did last year. But if Rick, you want to jump in with anything else we did this year in particular.
The other thing is that as part of the process of getting to the revised Board of Education budget this year, there are things that were in our level services that we reallocated that could be considered a quote cut. We mentioned the clerical paraprofessional at central office, the clerical paraprofessional at the high school, some of the retirements, the savings that are built in. We also reallocated those different positions. So during the presentation process of our budget, it was noted that we were able to get initially 5.5 new positions for about $91,000, and the bulk of that was coming from savings and or things that were reallocated or cut, to use the vernacular.
Okay. Ready for the next question? This one is from Mort Conlon, a name I recognize on Facebook. What is the impact to our system with the Board of Finance proposed budget? Why was this vote taken so early in the process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The past 2 years, the Board of Finance chose not to change the Board of Education budget, and they sent it directly through to the town budget hearing as well as the town annual meeting, and ultimately to the first referendum with no changes. This year's Board of Finance took a different approach, and they did make a decision amongst themselves to trim our budget. And a big part of that was in hopes that if it was a lower number, it would pass the first time. But can I get inside their heads and sort of figure out, why a different approach this year versus 2 years ago? I really can't. But one thing that we wanted to do to make sure that we were kind of staying at the same pace with them is, you might recall that in years past when a budget referendum fails, we don't immediately go back and rejigger our budget, because so many things in our budget are interrelated to each other that to do that 3 or 4 times becomes near impossible. And then what happens is, for example, if we say first budget referendum fails, we're going to cut the 4 paraprofessionals, and then the next budget referendum fails and we say, well, now we have to cut 2 teachers, but maybe I can bring back those paraprofessionals. So there's so many moving parts. But for tonight's presentation, because the Board of Finance did cut it before it ever went to referendum, we thought it only right that we meet as a board and try to figure out how to make work what the Board of Finance was willing to pass through. So I hope that answers your question, Mort.
Did anyone else have anything to add, or go to the next
Well, I
one?
was going to say, if you look at what we did from our original budget to what's being presented now, what the Board of Finance has given us as a number, there are cuts in there. We have taken out 2 positions, 2 secretarial positions, and we've cut those teachers that were going to be, and I forgot the term,
A content area coordinator.
content area coordinators, to just regular teachers. We were going to have more services for the children between the middle school and the high school to kind of blend them, get them, the middle schoolers, up into the high school a little easier. That's been cut, and they're just now regular teachers to replace the teachers that were lost.
And just to add one other thing, about $98,000 of the $186,000 that was required to be reduced was a known issue. We had our health benefits renewal. We get a firm number in December, and that's the lowest, the highest it could possibly be, and then it's updated throughout the budget process, both for the town and for the Board of Education. And sometime around April or May, it gets locked in. And our insurance broker did a great job of working with our current insurance provider to get the initial rate increase decreased by about 4%. So that's about $54,000 that was also taken off our initial request. The town will also be reflecting something on their side.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is from Bob. Since mandates seem to have an ongoing impact to the budget each year, how can the public help the school district in advocating for or against certain legislation? How would one even know what new things might impact the school budget this year or next?
Bob, I think you were a fly on the wall at our Monday meeting, because we were having this exact conversation. And I've actually attended a couple of legislative events this year. And in one of the events, kind of got a little tense with some of the state legislators, because myself and another board member asked them that exact question. Like, you guys are putting so many bills out there that how can we possibly stay on top of them? And their response was, well, just email us and just let us know what you think. And our response was, well, how can I do that if you've got 40 pieces of legislation pending, all at different stages? Some of them are still in committee, some of them are on the floor, some are up for discussion.
And everyone can impact us financially.
And every one of them could have a financial impact. So we do belong to a member organization called CABE, Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, and they do help us stay abreast of education issues. I personally have started to try to learn how to navigate the legislative website, but there doesn't seem to be a really good clearinghouse or anybody who will send us alerts when a bill is coming up for discussion that would allow us to write a letter or get together with one unified voice in a timely fashion. So my recommendation would be to start local. All of us on the Board of Education do know our local representatives. When they have office hours in town, we try to go down and see them, and essentially in the most polite way we can say, hey, leave us alone for a little bit. Let us play a little bit of catch up here. Instead of being so reactive all the time, maybe the legislator could listen a little bit more before they seem to be kind of quick to solve problems that are oftentimes very real problems, but oftentimes could also be solved if you let the superintendents get together for a while and fix these issues.
Why don't you mention the common calendar?
Oh, yes. So there's a law pending because somebody in the state legislature thought that it would save money if we had to regionalize our calendars, because evidently in southeastern Connecticut, the towns work together and they do share bus routes, and so they're on a common calendar, and that has saved them money. So someone from the legislature thought that was a really good idea. Well, let's just make it a statewide calendar, maybe with some regionality, and let's make everyone regionalized calendars, get together with their bus routes, and they'll save money. Well, that doesn't work in a town like Seymour, because we have the buses we need and Derby has the buses they need, and we do already collaborate with other school districts when it comes to sending children to VOAG schools and to some of the magnet schools. So that's a prime example of the legislator trying to fix an issue that actually fix a problem that wasn't a problem. And so now we have to deal with how do we navigate that and talk about a loss of local control. Absolute loss of local control in a state that promises that it gives us local control. So we're watching that one in particular from a financial point of view, but also from a community point of view. Like, we want to be able to do our own thing when it comes to setting our school calendar.
The other thing we can do, though, is if when all these new legislation laws get passed, is we have to argue to have more money come back to us. If they're going to set these mandates, then okay, fund the mandate. Don't just say,
Right.
do this, but you can do this, but here's the money to do it. And that doesn't happen. 40 pieces of legislation, they could come down with no money attached to them, and then we got to implement it.
Right.
Okay. Our next question. And the sirens you hear, Arms is right down the road. Our good friends at Arms are responding to a call. This question is from Tim. I need glasses. Tim J. Herrick, I think it says. Given the adoption of more information technology resources, what steps are being taken to reduce paper waste? There's a part 2 to that, but
okay.
Maybe that.
It's an excellent question. We've had conversations as a board. So when we're making an investment in iPads for first and second graders or for Google Chromebooks, doesn't mean we can stop buying textbooks. And I think that the short, easy answer to that is not yet, but maybe someday. So we are still navigating through the digital content world, but certainly while we don't think we're going to be able to get rid of our textbooks anytime soon, we do see that potentially happening in the future, although quite honestly, we're not really certain if that's ever going to result in cost savings because there's still a manufacturer, there's still a publisher who's going to publish those materials, and they're pretty savvy people. So they're charging quite a lot for digital textbooks. And Rick's going to jump in and speak to that a bit.
Just follow it also, Shooty. I know who this is, I think. The other piece to that is also, we live in a technological world now, and even at the age of 59, I've had to adapt. Don't print out the email that's sent to you, read it, and then either save it or get rid of it. We've started to build that culture both administratively and also in the classroom. You'll find that our teachers don't necessarily print things out and have the kids fill it out. They're doing things on the board, they're doing it through the various means available to them, whether it's Twitter or all those different mechanisms to allow kids to communicate, to do reports, to do projects without having paper moving around. We have actually seen a slight decrease in our paper utilization in the school district, and one of our missions is to go green, so we're continuing to look at opportunities to do that. For example, one of the things we're looking at in central office right now is to eliminate the use of paycheck stubs. We have 10 people in the entire district out of the approximately 300 that still take a live check. So we're trying to figure out a way to not give the other 290 an actual pay stub. They can see the same information on a computer screen. And we're working with our payroll provider right now to affect that for next September.
And we as a board went paperless.
Yes.
Our board packs were 60, 70 pages of paper that we printed out 11, 12 copies. We are now completely paperless.
And we deliver them along town. I know where everybody's mailbox is in town for the Board of Education.
So, and we did the calculation ones. I forgot what we saved. It was thousands of dollars we saved by going paperless.
And the second part of that question from Tim was, what steps are being taken to protect the privacy of students using Chromebooks?
I hear crickets.
Yeah.
And that is not meant to be a flip response because we certainly understand the issues surrounding privacy and we take that very seriously. And as part of our building of our infrastructure, we have a very secure firewall in our system, if you will. And so when the children sign on for their Google Chromebooks, they are within our school environment. They're not actually out on the World Wide Web. I mean, that sounds so old-fashioned to even say that. But I'm actually going to stop talking right there because I'm not going to pretend to be a technology expert. But we would be very happy to follow up with you and then share that information once we speak with Mr. Dyer, who's our technology expert.
I was to say that in having him come and present to us, we as a board are very confident that our kids are well protected. We know that, but I don't think we can articulate exactly what he tells us.
But for certain, even when they're accessing Google Docs from home, they're doing so signing on through their school website, through their school login, which affords a level of protection.
Okay. Another question from Bob was, is there an opportunity to change the budget still at the public hearing?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I believe the rules, and if I'm wrong about the rules, we will absolutely correct them as soon as possible. You need to have 50 people at a public hearing and to make it a quorum. And if a majority would like to reinstate monies to a budget, the budget numbers can go up. But it has to be a quorum, and it has to be a majority voting to put money back into any town department budget, not just the Board of Education. Conversely, I've been at public hearings where there have been 100 people who have made comments, and the Board of Finance takes very seriously what that mix is of for and against, and they'll even go so far as to say, so help me clarify, are you for this budget as it is, or do you want it cut? So the town hearing is a critical part of our process in Seymour, and it is taken quite seriously by the Board of Finance, who then walks away from the budget hearing and makes decisions on what to leave alone and what to cut. They will not, however, put something back in the budget without a vote, without an official kind of vote from the people.
And that's happening April 3rd?
That's happening April 3rd.
More Conlon asks, will this presentation be available for online viewing? Yes, it will. It's everything you hear is being recorded, and it'll be posted at the top of the Valley Indy right after this is over, and it'll be on all day tomorrow. And then Bob, and I would think I have one question after this, but it looks like we're out of public questions. How much will my taxes increase if I support this?
That's an excellent question, and I'm going to turn it to Rick, and if he doesn't have the exact numbers, we will post it. We had discussed this with the Board of Finance last week.
At the last Board of Finance meeting, and I would defer to someone presenting it, the number that was tossed out to us was for the average homeowner in Seymour, the mill rate as presented was about $115 or $116 increase. Does that sound about right?
Yes. So $116.
So, but we can't confirm that and get it up on the website because the calculation was being done in real time while the Board of Finance was working on the budget.
It came up at $5 a month, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that number that Mr. Belden just quoted would be for the full town budget, not just for the Board of Education budget. So again, we can follow up and dig a little deeper on the specifics of that to answer your question.
Okay, and then just my question was in terms of, and these are just questions they're general questions that we always hear, all the time regarding any school district and any budget. How many union contracts have you negotiated in like the last year or so, and who's getting raises and how much in this current budget?
The cycle for our union contracts is typically 3 years. The teachers are in the first year of a new 3-year agreement. That contract, the salary pool increase was 2.89. Then the next 2 years, the budget we're looking at for 2014-15 has a 2.99 salary pool increase. Then the third year is a 2.99 also. But that does not equate to what each teacher is getting. There's a step function within the salary grid. And basically what that means is if you're just a starting teacher, you may get a certain dollar amount increase from year to year if it's in the contract. That may be 6% on $40,000. If you're a top step teacher making $90,000, you may be getting 1 or 1.1%. So that has to be taken into account. When you add all those changes together, they come up theoretically to the 2.89 or 2.99. Administrators are the same percentage increases. Their union is a little different. Their step schedule doesn't exist, so they're actually getting a 2.89 or 2.99% increase. Conversely, though, in both those contracts, as Kristen mentioned earlier, we had significant savings in year one of each of those contracts by moving our groups to new health plans. We've moved to a high deductible health savings account program, which has saved a substantial amount of money on the teacher's contract in year one, well over $300,000 in 1 year savings, and the administrators in the 2014-15 budget moving into that. Obviously, there's not as many administrators as teachers, but we're still seeing a savings year to year. We're currently in negotiations with our secretaries and our custodians. We'll probably have the board's liaison committee still working within the parameters of around the same levels in terms of trying to get certain percentage increases and getting those same plans into place. So our goal is to have everybody in that range in both the salary side and on the health benefit side.
And the health benefit side, you've gotten new benefit packages, or is that a correct way to?
Yeah, we went from.
Are the teachers paying? Because usually it's you get a raise, but you have to pay more to your health insurance. Does that happen?
The bigger thing for us was getting the plan designs changed. We went from the typical. They still were pretty good plans from our perspective as an employer. They were a PPO, Century Preferred PPO, and then a Blue Care POE, which is typically HMO type product. We had those in place, but as everything happens, you have them over a period of time, and they start to take your claims experience, and they get priced to a certain point. You're not saving money anymore. The consumer-driven health insurance marketplace is now out there. You want people more paying more attention to how much health insurance costs, so that they're better shopper for their health insurance concerns. So the high deductible health plan does that. There's a $2,000 or $4,000 deductible that has to be paid by the employee first before they start getting benefits. They do contribute towards that. The percentages that we have right now in the contract, it was 8% in the first year for the high deductible health plan, 10% in the second year, and 12% in the third year. They have an auxiliary plan that they can buy up to because doesn't have a deductible like that. It's not an HSA product, but those are at 12.75, 14.75, and 17.75 as a percentage copay, and they had to buy up into those. So we've seen savings in both plans, but obviously we get a bigger savings with the high deductible health plan. So we've done a lot of work in that area, and that's something that going forward we also see savings on because the claims experience is better because of the way they're set up. So instead of having that line going, adding higher, we flattened it a little bit, so future budgets will also benefit from it.
Okay. Then let me know when you wrap this up. It's 8:30. We're coming in on 1 hour, but we do have another question from Jessica. I have to approve it. Hold on. Approved. Jessica asks, some towns present one combined town and school budget. Do you think that would be beneficial in terms of getting it passed sooner?
I absolutely think it would be beneficial, not only in getting it passed sooner, but in stopping the friction that I perceive happens as we move further into budget cycle. What I find has happened, and this is my perception, is it's us versus them. It's the people with children versus people without children. It's people who can afford taxes and who can really afford tax increases versus people who can't. So there is no question in my mind that the town would be better served financially, better served from an efficiency standpoint, doing better by our students and even by our town government, but also would be better served socially and emotionally if we were one town, one budget. That will take a charter revision. There is some talk that there is some interest in pursuing that, but it would be something that the town would have to vote on. So there would need to be a charter commission put together with that goal in mind, and then that would have to be voted on by the public to approve that kind of change. But I think that would be enormously beneficial.
And then we've talked, a lot of people in town have talked about it, and hopefully we can get back to that someday.
And then in terms of, and if we have nothing else, then just shut me up. But you brought up that 901 number at the end, which is interesting as a reporter.
Our slogan for this year is 901.
Okay. I mean, in the last couple of elections we've seen here in the Valley, Antonio Derby, I'm thinking of, where they had, they were voting one way for years and years and years. This is mayoral elections, and all of a sudden, the opposition or party that wasn't in power got together, rallied troops, and really did big upsets here. Not that this is a political process, but who do you need to target? Who do you need to convince?
I'll tell you exactly who we need to target. We need to target the people who unfortunately are not on this call today, is what, if I had to guess. We need to target the parent and the community member who stays home the day of the vote because they don't think it matters that much. Because they think that the schools will always open their doors, because we will always open our doors. So people have said to us, well, you guys make it work every year. And our question back is, well, what does it look like if it doesn't work? Well, I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like 30 kids in a middle school class. That's what it looks like when it doesn't work. So if every parent came out to vote, and please, I don't want anyone to assume that we think that everyone will vote yes. But quite honestly, I would rather lose a budget referendum knowing that 60% of the community came out to vote rather than lose a budget referendum with 18% of the community coming out to vote. It's very difficult to lose a budget referendum by 300 votes when not even 20% of the people came out to vote. The other thing that would make the 901 a reality is if every person who has a spouse or a significant other brought that significant other down to the voting polls with them, that would get us to 901 without question. I have actually analyzed the voter
Okay.
records. We don't know how people vote, yes or no, but we know who voted. And when you see home after home, neighbor after neighbor, that the mom votes but the dad doesn't, that
Is
the
that the
dad
pattern?
votes.
Is that, or it could go either way?
It's closer mom votes, dad doesn't than it is the other way. That's
Okay.
but I won't put ratios or percents out there.
And let me add this, and part of the reason could be that that person may not be a registered voter, but in the town of Seymour, you do not need to be a registered voter to vote for a referendum. All you need to be is an owner of $1,000 of property or more. So if your name, so you're not registered to vote. You don't vote in general election. It doesn't matter. As long as your name is on a deed for your house or on your car property or a boat, as long as you have registered property in town worth $1,000 or more, you can go down to town hall with your driver's license ID and say, I'm not registered to vote, but I own property. Here's my ID. The people that check you in have two sets of books. One that has registered voters, because you're registered to vote, and a book of all the property owners. So as long as you're on that list, you can walk in and vote.
Okay. Wow.
Right.
No idea. That's fascinating.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't see any more questions. I'll check Facebook real fast just to make sure. And no, there's no new notifications. So it looks like we're going to wrap this up. And I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come down here to the Valley Indy office. And, that's really it. Is there anything you wanted to add or?
Our pleasure.
No, thank you very much.
It worked.
And thank you all so much for listening.